this is our discussion for your third Anubhav paper. We have, I'll be discussing the passages with you. So I'll just talk about the passages first. We have around 28, 27 questions in the paper. And the objective of keeping these many questions is because last year also they had asked around this number. The passage types that we have taken, AI, climate change, etc. More so because we expect a few more passages from that area this year. Before we now start solving, I want to discuss some methodology that I want to follow throughout the solving process. Those of you who have attended classes with me that will know the methodology that I'm trying to follow. Those of you who have not might think it's new. But just try and follow along with each question. Your understanding of it will improve. So the first is we go through the passage based on the question stem. If I know, like if it's a short passage with one question and I know it's an inference question, suppose, I'll read the passage in a certain way. Once my specific to the question type, once my reading of the passage is done, so this is the step one. Once this is clearly done, only then will I proceed to the options. When I proceed to the options, and by the way, in the passage, I will have marked whatever I think are important words, etc. as needed. When I proceed to the options, then in each option, I have to very carefully figure out which words are problematic, right? And then evaluate based on those problematic words. So then after checking, this is step 2, checking our options very carefully. And notice I'm asking you to look at specific words or phrases. I'm not asking you to decide based on how an option sounds, whether it sounds correct or incorrect. That's not a good approach at all. So I want you to compare information very carefully and then eliminate 3 options, and then you'll be left with 1 option. So this evaluative process, let's say step 3 you check and step 4 you key in your answer. The reason why I've split these 2 up is there's a good chance, and this is going to happen with most of us, there is a good chance that you will have to compare between 2 options, option C and option D. And in this comparison, then you'll have to take a call which to eliminate, which to select. So that evaluation, let's separate that. So let's separate step 3, which is us identifying these carefully and evaluating all 4. Then we can eliminate 2. And then when we are confused between 2 options, we are very carefully supposed to check the information in the option, compare it with the information in the passage, and then say, okay, I can't find anything for option C. Therefore, I will go with option D. At this stage, if you jump to a conclusion really fast based on how an option sounds, by simply rereading option C and option D again, you're bound to make mistakes. So what you want to do is do this careful comparison. I'll try and repeat this process throughout the passages, and I expect all of you all to actually follow the process as much as the answer key as well. That process, if you follow in the exam, even under time pressure, your accuracy is going to be great. This sounds like it's time consuming. It's not. It actually, if you just mentally follow it, your efficiency and accuracy will both improve. Let's start with the questions. The first thing that I would do is I notice it's a short passage, so I'm going to look at the question stem. The question stem is asking me about the crux. The crux means the main point of the author. Those of you who have solved this question type with me would know, right? So first, when I read this, I'm going to identify the main point of the author. The reading process you'll all have to get better at. The reading process is not, I'll just describe this very shortly and then we'll continue with the questions really fast. So just just realize that when we are going through the passage, we are not trying to figure out 100% comprehension. This is not our goal. Okay, because this in many cases is not possible because of the time frame, not possible because of the topic, etc. So we are not trying for 100% comprehension. We are trying to comprehend just specifically why the author spoke to us, right? Why did the author speak to us? Meaning we are trying to figure out the main point of the author. Along the way, we'll notice some other pieces of information. That other part of the passage will be factual stuff, other stuff that the question will ask you about. For that, we'll refer back to the passage. So what I'm suggesting is, don't try and understand the passage 100% because it takes too long, and never try and memorize the passage. Never try and remember the passage. It's not a memory test. It's actually a referral test. Based on an option, you need to refer back to a specific part of the passage and then take a call. So what we are building is a map. We are figuring out the main point. So what we are building is a map for us to navigate through the passage. Let's try and do this with the first question, and notice how the reading process will make the options really easy to figure out. Okay, so the topic is the concept of AI has sparked intense debate. AI presents a range of opportunities. The kind of opportunities are discussed right throughout. In the workforce, automation powered by AI has already begun to. There are also concerns such as replacing human labor. As AI continues to develop, the fear of large-scale job loss has become a pressing concern. So it's a pressing concern for millions. On the other hand, AI advocates argue that it will create new jobs. So what we realize now is, since now if you notice, I've paid selective attention to certain parts of the passage more than other parts of the passage. And what I realize is the author is trying to talk about this intense debate about AI. That there are good things and there are bad things about AI. Privacy advocates, however, especially in sectors requiring human AI collaboration. So there are some people who worry about growing surveillance capabilities. There are some people who worry about facial recognition. With both benefits and drawbacks that need to be carefully balanced. So if we are to simplify this, about this intense debate on AI, the author concludes that this remains uncertain and benefits and drawbacks need to be carefully checked. Okay, this would be the main point of the author. Of course, you would have marked a few extra words, but this is great for our explanation. Okay, now let's look at this passage as the author has given us an idea. This is an idea, and the author has justified this idea. Okay. So I'm going to justify this idea. I'm going to talk about two types of passages. One is this idea justification passage type, and the other is a problem solution passage type. Solution bolo, recommendation bolo, these can be considered similar for our purpose. So there are two main passage types: idea justification and problem solution. This is a idea justification passage type. Now that I've identified the main point, notice how quickly we can go through the options. So I'm looking for something close to our main point. A says AI will lead to complete overhaul of the global economy, rendering many industries obsolete. What we want to say is there are pros and cons, right? There are pros and cons. And I don't want to solve the questions based on memory. Okay, so I want you to actually refer back to the passage. So AI will lead to a complete overhaul would be invalid, and rendering many industries also would be invalid, because this is not saying that there are pros and cons, right? And we have to decide carefully. So this does not match the crux or the main point of the author. A is invalid. Let's look at C. The development of AI will eliminate many job categories possible and make those members of the workforce redundant. Not telling me pros, cons, and therefore decide carefully. So again, main point missing. C is invalid. Let's look at D. AI may be universally accepted. This is invalid, as its benefits outweigh the potential drawbacks. Benefits outweigh has not been stated. We are told there are pros and there are cons. We need to decide which is which. So D is invalid. What we are left with is option B. AI has the potential to create new jobs. Potential to create new jobs. This is valid. But concerns over privacy, this is valid too. And job displacement remain. So this is, according to the author, something that it has potential to do good and it has potential to do bad. So option B is the closest to the main point. If you notice, we could have improved option B. We could have said in option B, therefore, decide carefully. Decide carefully. So option B is still the perfect choice among the options given. If there was another option which had more information, that could be a better choice. What I'm trying to suggest is we are supposed to evaluate based on the information in front of us. Option B is the correct answer for question 1. Let's look at passage 2. Again, our method is first we'll look at the question stem and we'll see what the examiner has to ask us. Which one of the following conclusions is most supported? This would mean an inference. An inference is something where we put two facts together and we come up with a new fact. For example, dark clouds and water in streets. So we put these two facts together and we can infer that it has rained. It has just rained. So I use two facts to reach a new conclusion. Of course, I can't conclude there was a thunderstorm. Thunderstorm would be an invalid conclusion because this information is not enough for me to conclude a thunderstorm. Alright, so we are trying to make a similar conclusion from the passage. Let's go through the passage once. The role of social media in modern society is both transformative, controversial. So social media, both transformative and controversial. On one hand, social media platforms allow people to communicate, etc., etc. So this part is telling us the positives of social media. Allow individuals to connect and foster communication, collaboration. But social media, however, has a dark side, contributing to the spread of misinformation, polarizing political discourse, undermining mental health. The anonymity afforded by social media allows users to engage in harmful behavior such as cyberbullying, trolling without fear of accountability. So all of these are talking about negatives. There is still a lack of consensus. While efforts are there to regulate, there is a lack of consensus on how to strike the right balance between freedom of speech and preventing harm. So social media is both good and bad, and we don't know yet how to strike the right balance. This is not yet known between freedom of speech and how to regulate. Balance is between freedom of speech and regulation. Let's look at the most supported conclusions. D says the spread of misinformation is a significant problem, which is true with social media. Unlike prior print medium, media would have been better here, but unlike prior print medium is invalid. This comparison has not been made. So factual inaccuracy, no such comparison in the passage. D is incorrect. This cannot be concluded, just like we couldn't conclude thunderstorms. Let's look at C. Efforts to regulate social media have failed due to the lack of consensus between nations on the topic of freedom of speech. Failed, invalid, and failed due to lack of consensus, also invalid. The passage is saying we are still trying to figure this out. How to strike a right balance. So this we can't say that the passage declaring this as a failure. So C is invalid, again cannot conclude. A says social media is an unequivocal force for good, right? So like a inevitable force for good. So this would be invalid. This is again not stated. It has positives and negatives. This has a typo. Freedom of speech is missing, by the way. But even using this, we could have eliminated option A. B is the right answer, right? B talks about social media is a mixed blessing, positive and negative, and developing an acceptable framework for regulation is difficult. Okay. So what I want you to realize now, this is the second question we are doing, is I told you in the methodology, first we read the passage. First, of course, we see the question stem, and along with that, we read the passage. This would be step 1. Step 2 would be we look at the options and find what is problematic in the option. And then we go to step 3, we compare and evaluate this, and step 4, we choose between two options, right? And we mark an option as correct. This was the flow. So this is what I want you to pay attention to when we are looking for problematic words and phrases. We are mostly looking for quantifying words and phrases. They quantify or measure stuff. They measure degree of something or quantify degree of something. So let's say social media is an unequivocal force. So this means it's a absolute, certain, guaranteed So again, this is quantifying the role of social media, and this is an invalid quantification. So this is quantifying the success of, or the degree of success, right? Quantifies or measures degree of success, so is invalid. Unlike prior medium is quantifying or comparing two things, x is equal to y, or x is not equal to y in this case. So this comparison also has not been made by the author. What the author says is mixed blessing, which is valid, right? Calling it a mixed blessing is valid, and difficult is also valid based on how to strike a balance. There is still a lack of consensus on how to strike a balance, so therefore difficult. So if you notice, difficult also is a quantifying or a measuring term, but I found evidence to justify it, whereas I didn't find evidence to justify, say, failed or any other term like that. So notice this pattern. Let's look at the next question. All right. Based on the passage, which of the following assumptions are valid? Let's go through the passage. We are looking for assumptions. Assumptions, inferences, we don't have to identify the main point that carefully as we did in the first question. We just need to sort of know the location of facts, and then we need to compare the facts and check. So let's see how this process works. As climate change accelerates, governments around the world have been exploring various strategies to reduce carbon emissions. So climate change acceleration is leading governments to take reduction in carbon emission actions. Widely discussed solution is renewable energy sources and transitioning to wind, solar, hydropower. Renewable sources benefits are written, significant environmental benefits, including XYZ, some reductions happen. Renewable energy technologies are often more expensive to deploy. So now it's talking about negatives of renewable energy. Here was positive of renewable energy, now negative. They are not yet reliable enough. In addition, there are concerns about environmental impact. So they also have environmental impacts. And despite these challenges, many experts believe gradual shift towards renewable energy is essential. Gradual shift is essential. I'm noticing the quantifying words used by the author also, right? And effects of climate change, though it will require significant investment and political will. Okay. So you remember that we saw idea and justification passage type. This is problem and solution, because I know the author has spoken about a problem. This also could be called an idea, but let's call it a problem because here the author is telling us a solution, right? Solution or recommendation, which is significant investment and political will would be required, and gradual shift, based on many experts, gradual shift is essential. So the author is recommending some kind of a solution or recommendation. Now let's go through the options. We are looking for assumptions. A valid assumption, I told you what inferences are. A valid assumption is something that supports the passage. Think of a valid assumption like this table, right, on which the passage is resting. I get rid of the assumption, the passage will fall apart. That's what I want you to think of. So, an assumption is a hidden logical connection between two things in the passage. It's underlying the passage. It's literally within the passage. So let's think of which of these are valid assumptions. One says renewable energy has benefits beyond only reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So this needs to be checked. It's an extreme quantifying phrase. And so if you notice, the passage tells us renewable energy offers significant benefits including greenhouse gas emissions. The transition from fossil fuel, reduction in carbon emissions also has been discussed. So let's say renewable energy has benefits beyond only reduction in greenhouse gas. This is not directly stated, so we need to check. What this means is, let's say renewable energy will help us with reduction in greenhouse gases, plus it will help us in something else, plus it will help us in something else possibly. From the passage, we are told that it is essential, right? It is essential. So if it's essential, we can say it's clearly going to be required for other things, but this is not directly stated. Just based on the word essential, we can say that it's required for more things beyond just this. So we can check this, and if I remove this, then this part of the passage, essential part, would stop making sense, but this is slightly problematic. So we need to check if an option allows us to put this problematic one with another sensible one. Let's look at 2. So this is maybe correct, question mark. Let's look at 2. Employing wind, solar and hydropower solutions can lead to habitat loss. This is valid. If I said cannot lead to habitat loss, then like I told you, if I remove the table from below the passage will stop making sense. So if I removed this, if I said cannot, the passage will fall apart. This means 2 is definitely valid, right? So 2 is definitely valid. So these are all the possibilities right now that we need to evaluate. Let's look at 3. Due to geographic factors, some countries cannot use renewable technology. So now we need to check about geographic factors. What is this, the degree that the author has spoken about? They cannot use renewables, they can use renewables, they may be able to use renewables. Let's check. We are told in many regions, they are not yet reliable enough. So not yet reliable enough does not mean cannot use. Not yet enough is not the same as cannot, right? So 3 is definitely invalid. So if 3 is invalid, 1 is sort of possible based on essential. So that would invalidate all of these options, and D is the right answer for question number 3. All right. Let's see the next one. And here we have another assumption question. We know the process now. I won't repeat it. Let's go through the passage. In recent decades, the rise of global trade has led to significant increase in movement of goods. So impact of global trade on movement of goods, services. While many view this as positive development, bringing economic growth and increased access. For example, global trade can lead to exploitation. Others argue that it has created inequalities. And then we are given examples of these inequalities, exploitation of workers, lower wages, MNCs can dominate markets. So let's say lower wages dominate markets, so monopolies. Furthermore, global trade has been associated with environmental degradation. World continues to globalize. These concerns must be addressed to ensure benefits of trade are more evenly distributed. So the author is describing some problems associated with global trade, some benefits also, but mostly problems, right? And that's it. There is no real recommendation by the author except that we must address them. Address them and make it more equitable, right? That's all the option says. Now let's look at A. Global trade traffic has caused climate change. If you go back to the passage and check, we can't say that it has caused, meaning it is the only cause of climate change. We are told global trade traffic has led to environmental damage, but we can't say it has caused climate change, right? So one would be an invalid option for caused. Caused is again talking about degree of association as a cause. This is fully caused climate change. This has been a major causal factor in climate change, that kind of degree. We can't say it is that degree. It is global trade traffic has contributed to climate change. That could be true. A is invalid for saying caused. B says net increase in global economic growth has drawbacks. So this is, if you notice, net increase in global economic growth has drawbacks. We are told that a total increase in global economic growth is problematic. Let's put B aside. If I said it has no drawbacks, then the passage will stop making sense. So B could be the right answer. All right, let's look at C. Multinationals in developing countries cannot compete. This is again a degree word and this is invalid, not discussed in the passage. MNCs target local businesses. They don't target local businesses, but they end up crowding out local businesses, right? But it's not officially targeted by the MNCs. So the right answer here would be option B, right? Net increase, total increase in global trade has some drawbacks. Then the author tells us we must address them and make it equitable, etc. But this is the main point that I'm talking about. This is not necessary for an assumption. An assumption like option B is some logic which is underlying the passage. All right, let's check. Let's see the next one. Here we are with question 11. Main concern raised by the author in the passage. So this is a main point type question. Main concern of the author in the passage. If a main challenge is described by the author, then we have to make sure that we write this challenge in the option key. Let's look at the passage. The rise of AI has the potential to revolutionize every industry. However, the pace at which AI is being developed has raised concerns. So rise of AI is good but bad. Concerns, right? In particular, ethical concerns, in particular questions about the future of employment. Additionally, lack of regulation and oversight in AI development has created an environment with MNCs could control direction of technological progress. As such, there is an urgent need for thoughtful regulation that ensures AI is used responsibly. So, pros, or let's say problems and maybe some benefits of AI, but with a recommendation. Urgent need for thoughtful regulation. Author is saying we need urgently. So, problem and solution or recommendation. Okay. Now that I have problem and solution or recommendation, I want to make sure that this main concern is saying AI is good but also especially bad. At least I want to say this, and I also say maybe that we also need to regulate it. So there's a recommendation also. Let's look at option D. Ethical concerns about AI development are overstated. Not are overstated is talking about ethical concerns. D is invalid. This is also a degree phrase or term quantifying something. C says AI may not affect employment in the future if government oversight is there. This, although government oversight of some kind is recommended, right, through regulation, but this does not mean that it may not affect employment, right? So to what degree government oversight will play a role is discussed in the passage, but I can't say it will stop something, reduce something, or have no impact. This I can't state from the passage, right? So this is saying it will stop something. This is invalid. A says AI development can improve the quality of life for most workers. This is invalid from the passage, and this is not the main concern of the author. Main concern of the author is problems associated with AI, which is only option B. Without regulations, like I told you, we need to mention some regulations. Large corporations could control AI and cause unemployment, right? So there are some bad things associated with AI. B is the right answer. Let's look at the next question, question 12. What can be inferred from the passage? This is an inference question. I've already discussed what inferences are and how to read for an inference question. I don't need to identify the main point as carefully. Globalization has had a profound impact. While this interconnectedness has contributed globalization, while this has contributed to economic growth, also significant challenges. Industries are trying to lower labor costs. The backlash against globalization in recent years reflects growing dissatisfaction. So globalization is considered as having problems and perceived inequality. Addressing these challenges requires a nuanced understanding of trade-offs involved in economic integration. So to address these challenges, we need to understand the negatives associated in global economic integration. All right, let's look at which of these is a possible inference. Globalization has resulted in significant economic growth in most globalized countries, economies. These words are invalid from the passage. B says the challenges associated with globalization are more relevant to developing countries. This is not valid. This is like UPSC will suggest options which are based on our GS paper 1 knowledge. This is invalid actually from the passage. D says globalization has less impact on workers in economies where in outsourced industries. In economies in outsourced industries. But this has less impact, is a quantifying phrase. It's an invalid phrase. C is the right answer here. Backlash against globalization is driven by job displacement and inequality caused by differential global labor costs. All right. Fairly easy question. Let's look at question 13. Main concern highlighted in the passage. So, another main point type questions. Main point type questions are recently, they're asking more and more questions, main point ones. Earlier, there used to be only 3 to 4 at max. Let's go through this. The debate surrounding ethics of genetic engineering. So there is a debate about this. Continues to evolve. There are new possibilities. One hand, genetic engineering holds promise of eradicating diseases, improving human health. On other hand, concerns are there. The potential to create so-called designer babies raises questions about the boundaries of scientific intervention. Balancing the promise of scientific integration with ethical considerations will be a crucial challenge in coming decades. So the author is defining a problem for us. This will be a crucial challenge, balancing progress and ethics. All right, let's go through the options. Let's look at option D. Genetic engineering has ethical implications which can be balanced by relying on scientific progress. So, which ethical implications valid, which can be balanced, this is problematic, right? We need to balance between A and B, doesn't mean one will balance the other. So we'll put D aside. Let's look at C. The creation of designer babies must be balanced with the ethical concerns surrounding the issue. So this, again, designer babies must be balanced with ethical concerns. Again, problematic. We can't find information in the passage. We can say that the use of genetics to create designer babies must be balanced with the ethical concerns surrounding the issue. So we'll put option C aside again. See, these are all problematic options and we need to actually evaluate which of the options would make sense. Let's look at option A. The potential of genetic engineering to eradicate diseases which can be overlooked. We can't say the author's main concern is we are missing out on the benefits, right? So invalid. We can't also say, let's look at option B. The ethics and unintended consequences of genetic engineering pose significant challenges. So this is the main concern, right? There are significant challenges about ethics and unintended consequences. Option B comes closest to the concern, right? But we need to evaluate option B, and this is what I meant, versus option C versus option D. And in each case, we need to find something problematic. Now, one is main concern was not about genetic engineering has ethical implications which can be balanced. Firstly, can be balanced also is a problem, saying that the both will cancel each other out. We can't suggest that, and that's not the main concern. C says the creation of designer babies must be balanced. Again, not this specific issue being balanced is the concern. And again, we don't know if the author is simply talking about balancing designer babies or the broad concept of genetics, right? Or sort of interfering in the natural process. So C is invalid. By elimination, strictly we reach option B. All right. Let's see the next one. This is passage 21. Which of the following does the passage suggest as essential for solving the global food systems challenges? So there will be a solution given for global food systems challenges. Since it's a short passage, I'm reading the question first. All right. Okay. So let's go through the passage. The global food system is facing immense pressure from population growth, climate change, changing dietary patterns. So problem is defined for us. We already know that the author will tell us a problem. While technological advancements such as GMOs, precision farming have boosted food production, these alone are not enough. So technological advancements alone are not enough. What we need is a more comprehensive approach is needed that includes sustainable agricultural practices, reduced food waste, equitable access. So more comprehensive approaches recommended by the author. Without such an approach, the challenges posed by etc. may become insurmountable. So without such an approach, matlab, we found evidence for this word, essential. अगर ये approach नहीं होगा तो you won't be able to change the outcome. The challenges posed by growing population and environmental challenges may become insurmountable. Right? Let's look at the options. A says technological advancements in agriculture can be sufficient. So can be sufficient, measuring degree of success of technological advances. Actually, they alone will not be sufficient. So A is invalid. D says improving food distribution rather than increasing production is the key, rather than X. So X versus Y, X is the key. No such comparison is made in the passage, right? C says a combination of technological innovation, sustainability, equitable access is necessary. So the author had told us a comprehensive framework. So this is what this is talking about. C is the right answer. B says climate change will force the food system to evolve. Matlab, because of climate change, naturally the system will evolve. This is invalid, not discussed in the passage. The author is recommending a very specific thing. More comprehensive approach is recommended. C is the right answer for question 21. Let's look at question 22. What is the main challenge associated with automation according to the passage? Main challenge associated with automation would be, let's go through the passage. Technological advances, especially in the field of automation, have revolutionized many industries. So technology and in automation have revolutionized. They've increased efficiency. However, they've also raised concerns about displacement of workers. As more tasks become automated, workers in certain sectors may find it increasingly difficult to find stable employment. We actually expect passages on these topics this year. The challenge lies in ensuring that benefits of automation are distributed equitably while also providing workers with the skills necessary to adapt changing job market. So again, the challenge lies in ensuring benefits are distributed equitably. Let's look at the options. We have A, the inability of automation. We are looking at the main challenge again. Inability of automation. Degree, again, we are looking at to equitably provide opportunities, not discuss that automation has inability. C says the disturbance in employment patterns caused due to automation needs to be reversed. Whether we can completely stop it or completely cure it, not mentioned in the passage. C is invalid. D says overemphasis on only high skill wage job creation in the face of automation. No such overemphasis in only high skill jobs is a challenge discussed in the passage. So D is invalid. Right answer is option B, the redistribution of gains fairly. Right? Option B is the correct choice. Let's look at question 23. We are looking for best summary. Best summary would mean we need to identify the main point of the author, which must be there in the option, presented in the best possible way. And we also need other facts and opinions to also be represented accurately if they're included. Okay, so let's look at question 23. All right. So, the global food system is at a crossroad. GMOs have the potential to increase. So GMOs, the global food system, they have the potential to increase food production and reduce hunger. The ethical and environmental implications remain. So ethics and environmental. Some argue that GMOs can help solve food security. Others caution that GMOs may have unintended consequences. We know the consequences. Additionally, the widespread use of chemical pesticides, fertilizers, etc. has raised concern about soil degradation. In recent years, a shift toward organic farming and regenerative agriculture has gained traction. So, regenerative agriculture has gained traction. These methods often face scalability issues and may not be able to meet growing demands of global population. All right. So, may not be able to meet demands of global population. All right, let's see the next one. Let's see option B. So option B says the debate surrounding GMOs, though about their ethical implications, ignores the impact on food production sustainably. Ignores their impact would be invalid. No such mention of ignoring the impact. GMOs are a viable time-tested solution. Invalid. There are debates or challenges associated with it. And D says organic farming can meet the world's food demands without causing environmental damage. Invalid, not mentioned. Option C is the correct answer. Technological advances must be carefully weighed against potential environmental and ethical concerns. Option C is the correct choice. Let's see the next one. All right. Right, we are discussing question 31. Okay. So, question 31 is talking about relationship between climate change policies and social economic outcomes. It's a specific question from the passage. Which of the following can be the right relationship? One moment. Right, so I expect you to mark these words, by the way, stuff like this. Okay, let's see what we can find in the passage. Climate change has emerged as one of the most pressing challenges. So again, problem has been described for us carefully. While nations collectively recognize the importance of limiting global warming, the policies required to achieve this goal remain contentious. Some countries are driven by economic interests, while others argue for drastic measures. What remains clear is the outcome of these debates will determine not only the future of our environment, but also the socio-economic trajectory. Technological innovation has the potential. So this has the potential to ease the transition, but it cannot substitute the need for robust political will and global cooperation. So the author has recommended this robust political will and global cooperation and technological innovation as something that could resolve this issue of climate change being a challenge to global governance. All right, so let's go through the options. What can be inferred from the passage about the relationship between climate change? So let's infer about this and this. We have already seen it in the passage, but I expect you to specifically mark question stems which are slightly different than usual. Let's look at option A. Countries with minimal regulatory intervention are less at risk. Again, quantifying phrase, measuring phrase, invalid in this case. Let's look at B. Technological innovation can reduce the need for political cooperation. In fact, we are told only this is not enough. We need political will and we need, I think, infrastructure or something like that. So B is invalid. C says socio-economic outcomes are highly dependent on global cooperation, and right, this was global cooperation and political will. So this is what option C sounds like, being highly dependent, because based on the words in the passage which says need, highly dependent could apply. Let's look at D. The future socio-economic trajectory is determined by technological advancements in reversing climate impacts. Determined by, invalid. So the right option is option C for question 31. Let's look at the next passage. This looks like a long passage, right? Since it's a long passage, if you notice it in the paper, you will be able to see at least 1 or 2 questions based on how it's printed. But this passage will have 3 questions, 32, 33, 34. I'm not going to read the questions before, because 3 questions means I'll have to sit memorizing them. There's no point. I'm just going to read the passage because it has more than 1 question. And then I'm going to answer each question separately. But first we'll identify the main point. All right. Urbanization of cities has seen rapid growth. Cities that once relied on traditional methods of production and small-scale agriculture have become sprawling metropolises. So urbanization of cities we are discussing, and earlier once these cities relied on traditional methods, have become big cities and high-rise buildings, vast network of highways are needed. Urbanization landscape has undergone profound changes. So urbanization in cities and how it is shifted from traditional means of production to a more modernized means of production. This progress has come at a cost. So because of this shifting to more modern, we have increased pollution and other issues. Urban dwellers who once had a closer connection to nature now find themselves increasingly disconnected. So it has had a physiological impact, a psychological impact. The demand for more efficient, larger scale infrastructure has resulted in disjointed approach. So even urban planning, because of these problems, has been affected. Despite these challenges, there are those who argue that technological innovation and smarter urban planning can mitigate the negative effects. So new methods of waste management. Now the author is recommending how this could be helpful. These challenges can mitigate, how these methods can reduce. However, the implementation of these solutions requires substantial investment would be required, coordination will be required. The divide between progress and environmental concerns continue to widen. So divide between progress and concerns is widening, and there are debates. While some advocate for more sustainable, others argue costs of such efforts are prohibitive, and economic benefits of rapid urbanization should not be ignored. Ultimately, the challenge remains to find a balance between progress and preservation. Right? So, since it's a longer passage, slightly more nuance, पर type तो same ही है, finally बोल रहा है balance. देखो, the only difference is in between the author has recommended some technological innovations of a specific kind. So we know the problem, and then the author has briefly mentioned some possible thing to reduce the problem. Let's go through each question. 32, central concern. So main point of the passage. Right? We need to say that the cities or urbanization, this has caused problems. These problems possibly have technological innovation, but we need to balance, according to the author, for this we need to balance between progress and preservation, right? We need to choose things between progress and preservation. All right. So let's go through the options. Main point we're looking for: the shift towards urbanization is inevitable and beneficial to economic growth. Invalid, no challenges mentioned. B says technological advancements and smart urban planning are secure ways to sustain cities in the future. We can't say are secure to sustain, because we need to balance between progress and this. C says rapid expansion of cities is leading to environmental degradation and disconnection from nature. So a part of option C is valid, or rather option C is valid, but it's only a part of the main point. Partial or incomplete. Right? It needs more. Let's look at, so C is definitely problematic. Let's look at D. The economic costs of sustainable urban development are too high to be realistically implemented, meaning we can't actually take any action. Option D is completely invalid. So option C is the only possible choice through elimination. A, B and D don't work. Even the option B is incomplete, is the best possible choice. Let's look at the next one. Which of the following inferences can be drawn from the passage? A says economic growth is the primary driving force behind urbanization. Primary driving force for urbanization. Invalid, not discussed, cannot be inferred from the passage. B, technological innovation is sufficient to resolve the environmental problems caused by urbanization. By the way, just to remind all of you all, I'm not solving these questions based on memory. I have solved them before, and I have seen the passage with you right now. Do not solve passages based on memory. Do not check options based on memory. I want you to refer back to the passage every single time, and that will ensure accuracy. It barely, referring back to for each option, barely will add, say, around 20 seconds to the entire solving process. But I really want to do that because that will help you be more accurate. Sufficient to resolve would be invalid. C says the long-term effects on biodiversity and ecosystem are often secondary concerns. actually, one moment. Right. So we need to actually check option C carefully back in the passage. We notice that we have a slightly harder question here. So I'm trying to see from option C, which mentions biodiversity, effects on biodiversity, and association with urban planning. Right? What is the association? Is it a secondary kind of association? So let's check that. See, often overlooks, right? I'm told here in clear words that it often overlooks long-term impact. So therefore second nature or secondary is valid in the option. So I actually went back, invested time, and I found this. It will be much faster on the sheet. Okay, so our often secondary is a quantifying phrase, but it's acceptable from the passage. We'll just check option D once. The environmental consequences of urbanization have largely been resolved. So this is invalid. So C is the correct answer. I would say C is probably the first tough question that we have seen in our sequence of questions. Let's look at question 34. I'm looking at an assumption from the same passage. Coordination. I told you what assumptions are. Assumption would be underlying the passage. A, coordination between various stakeholders and sustainable practices is near impossible. Matlab ho nahi paega, not stated. Again, a quantifying phrase. B, expansion of cities is inevitable. B, can't pursue it. Invalid. Earlier cities relied on traditional methods of production. So, maybe. D says the loss of green spaces disconnects man from nature. Okay. Now, another difficult question that I see here. If you are comparing option C and option D, see what words you now need to check. The loss of green spaces disconnects man from nature. So, does this apply to mankind in general? Like, has the author been general enough to say this applies to mankind? This is what I need to check here. Right? And the degree of disconnection mentioned here. The other thing in option C I need to check, earlier cities relied on. So did earlier cities rely on traditional methods of production? And if I go back to the passage, we are told cities that once relied. So cities that once relied, pay very careful attention to this. Cities that once relied is actually again, it's quantifying or measuring or suggesting that there are some cities like X, Y, and Z which relied on traditional methods. But I can't say earlier all cities relied on traditional methods. So C is definitely invalid. What I'm left with is option D, and if you notice in option D, if I said urban dwellers who once had closer connection to nature now find themselves increasingly disconnected from the natural world. So whoever urban dwellers who once had a closer connection to nature, who was living in cities, now is increasingly disconnected. So if I said the loss of green spaces, what I told you was, if I remove an assumption, if I remove a valid assumption, right, the passage will fall apart. The assumption is like a table or logic that connects the passage. So if I said the loss of green spaces does not disconnect man from nature, urban dwellers disconnected, all of that part of the passage will get invalidated. So this means option D is the correct answer. Let's look at, so question 34 also I would categorize as slightly harder. We are looking at question 41 and This set has 3 passages, and so I think 3 single questions it has, right? Okay. So let's go, best summarizes we are looking for. Let's go back to the passage and go through it. UBI has gained significant attention. Potential solution to poverty and economic inequality. UBI is explained to us then. Proponents argue UBI would provide a safety net. So benefits of UBI. Critics, however, contend that UBI would be prohibitively expensive and could lead to inflation. They also argue that it may reduce incentive to work. So there are negatives for UBI as well. Despite these concerns, pilot programs in several countries have shown promising results. So some programs are showing some results, suggesting that UBI could be a viable solution. So the author is talking about UBI and the author thinks this could be viable, right? So a recommendation being made by the author describing a problem, which is in this case poverty and economic inequality, and then suggesting a solution. Let's go through the question. We are looking for a summary. A says UBI is an acceptable solution to pervasive economic inequality, as challenges of the associated inflation have been overcome by some nations. So challenges have been overcome. Again, measuring degree of success, invalid. This is not a fact stated. This can't be a part of my summary. My summary needs the main point stated correctly. This has to be there. Facts should be stated correctly. Opinions should be stated correctly if they're mentioned. B says UBI can cause inflation and change employment patterns, but some examples suggest that it is a promising solution. So promising solution is valid. Can cause inflation and change employment patterns also is possibly true. We'll check if there is a better summary. C says UBI should be implemented immediately to solve poverty. Implemented immediately would be invalid. C says UBI is not a viable solution. So the opposite of what the author said. So option D is invalid. B is the correct choice. UBI can cause these problems, but some suggest that there are examples of a promising solution. Option B is the right answer. One moment. All right, let's take a look at the question. Again, another summary question. Let's now identify the main point carefully. Global water crisis is a growing concern. It'll impact a lot of people. Water scarcity causes are mentioned. Climate change, inefficient water management. Then many regions are experiencing droughts. In addition, increasing demand for water from agricultural, industrial and urban sectors placing further strain on already limited water resources. So problem is getting worse. So there's depletion of aquifers. Some countries have invested desalination plants. These solutions are expensive, may not be sustainable. So current solutions are also not sustainable. In many areas, water pollution is a significant issue. To address, governments and organizations must take urgent action to ensure sustainable management of resources. So we are told governments must take urgent action to ensure sustainable management of water resources. So this is especially recommended by the author for the problem, right? So it suggests maybe the author thinks this will reduce the problem. Let's look at question 42 options. Climate change is a major cause of global water crisis. Little can be done to prevent it. Invalid. We want the main point, which is the causes of global water crisis, and we want, since the problem is mentioned, causes of water crisis, the solution in this case or recommendation has to be mentioned, by the way, in the right option, ideally, unless UPSC gives us a faulty question, but this must be mentioned in the option. Solution was we need to manage So we need the word manage, or we need suggestion of the word manage somewhere. A is invalid. Let's look at D. Desalination plants, water conservation programs can solve global water crisis. No mention. So main point invalid. Not mentioned. C says water scarcity is mostly a problem in developing countries. Not telling us the main point. B is the right answer. Global water crisis is caused by multiple factors which are discussed in the passage. But we need to urgently manage water resources sustainably. So this is the only one which is saying water concerns are there and we should manage the concerns properly. So option B is the correct answer here. Let's see the next one. This is question 43, crux of the passage. If you notice, most of this set has questions on summary and crux of the passage, right? One moment. All right, let's get started. It's a summary question. It's a main point question. We'll go through the options. The main point of the author is about learning has been accelerated online because of pandemic. Online learning offers benefits, we are told. It also presents challenges. Challenges is students may lack the necessary technology. So it's not equitable. So it creates disparities. Online learning may require different set of skills and self-discipline. So students also need different qualities, which some students may struggle to develop. Teachers also face difficulties in adapting their teaching methods to a digital format. Despite these challenges, proponents argue that digital learning can be a valuable tool for education. So it's still considered valuable. The long-term effectiveness remains uncertain and it will require ongoing efforts. So long-term effect is uncertain, it will require ongoing efforts, right? So that students can benefit equally. So equitable karne ke liye ongoing efforts will be required, right? So let's look at A. All students can be equally prepared. Again, quantifying words, and further adjustments will assure results. Not suggested in the passage. Remain uncertain was written. B says online learning may become the sole method of education. Again, measuring something, quantifying something, B is invalid. D says teachers are fully equipped. They're not fully equipped without any challenges. C is the only possible choice. Digital learning can create educational disparities due to unequal access to technology and skills. Let's look at question 44 from the same passage. This is asking us assumptions made from the same passage. One moment. Self-discipline is mentioned in the passage, but not discipline of all those involved in online learning, right? Invalid. Discipline of students is mentioned in the passage. So one is an invalid assumption, right? So we need to check 2 and 3 both. 2 says some teachers are ineffective at providing quality education. So we are told in the passage they find digital systems or mediums challenging and they can't give effective education. So 2 is valid. If I said some teachers are not ineffective, that would be invalid. So 2 is a valid assumption. 3 says COVID-19 caused some students to lose out on education. This was slightly tricky because we are told, I'll tell you how we reach this idea of option 3. I know many students would have gone with D here because of 3. But this is valid even though this is saying caused. How is this valid? So COVID led to more digital learners from the passage, step 1, right? More learners therefore did not have access than earlier, right? Because learners have total increased, more digital learners. So therefore, more learners did not have access than earlier. So therefore, for some, COVID pandemic has caused students to lose out on education. So C is the right answer. If I said COVID pandemic has not caused some students to lose out on education, it would have invalidated the passage. C is the right answer. Let's see the next set of questions. We are at question 51, sorry, passage 1 from question 51. Just one moment. We're looking at inferences. They could be from anywhere in the passage. We are told rapid industrialization has led to unprecedented increase in global GHGs. A problem is described for us. This acceleration has caused other problems. There remains significant resistance from some industries, particularly in developing countries. So, resistance, particularly in developing countries, to adopt technologies by industries because of economic viability. Costs are high. The world stands at crossroads where benefits from mitigating change are clear, yet the means are complex, often perceived as costly. So benefits are clear according to the author, yet the solutions are costly. So just discussing a problem in the passage, that is what the author did. We are looking for inferences. Let's look at option A. Concerns about profit margins of some industries in developing countries stall their adoption of cleaner technologies. So in developing countries, there is resistance. I'm not using my memory. I want you to check in the passage. I've solved the passage twice. So A could be right. It's saying there is some industries in some developing countries resist adoption of cleaner technologies. This would be a valid assumption, inference, not assumption. I'm sorry. This would be a valid inference. B says the cost of cleaner technologies is largely not as relevant. Comparative phrase not stated correctly in the passage. C says industry has little to no impact. Invalid. D says the benefits of mitigating climate change are not widely accepted by scientific minds in many developing countries. Not widely accepted by industries would be valid, but by scientific minds, we don't have, just like I told you, we can't use A and B to infer C. In the example, the valid inference was rained, but I can't infer thunderstorm. Similarly, I can't infer scientific minds. Right, so option D is invalid. A is the right answer here for question 51. Let's look at question 52. Main dilemma highlighted in the passage. Main dilemma matlab main problem kya hai passage ke according. So main concern wala question type, main point wala question type. Growing awareness of environmental consequences of plastic waste. Consequences of plastic waste and its awareness. So the ban on single-use plastics is suggested. Some countries have already implemented. Challenge lies in ensuring compliance and finding sustainable alternatives. Compliance is hard, alternatives are hard. These are challenges. The debate underscores a crucial issue, the tension between, so the author is adding something to the main point, right? Tension between environmental sustainability and economic growth. Author is linking single-use plastic bags to economic growth. For many industries, plastic products are cheap, convenient, and transitioning away from them poses financial difficulties. Balancing these competing priorities remains one of the most significant hurdles. So, balancing between commerce versus sustainability, right? That is what the passage is talking about. All right. Let's take a look at the options. What is the main dilemma? Improbability of enforcing a global ban. Improbability is measuring, again, quantifying. A is invalid for saying improbability. Balancing the tension between environmental sustainability and commerce. This would be the right option most probably, but I still need to check C and D. Missed economic benefits of banning, not stated. How to make plastic bags such that we can use them without harming. Alternatives are discussed, but finding alternatives is a challenge. How to make such that we can use them without harming nature is saying we can probably make them and not harm nature at all. This is not stated. So I know some may have gone with D, but B is the right answer. It's discussed in the last line of the passage. So let's look at question 53. Author suggests about transitioning to a low carbon economy. What challenges or what other things could be there related to transitioning to a low carbon economy? All right. The notion that individual companies, governments can make substantial progress is a dangerous myth. The notion that we can make substantial progress without any economic sacrifices is a misconception. It's a dangerous misconception. So we'll have to make some economic sacrifices according to the author. While technological advancements are suggested, they're not a panacea. Panacea would mean a solution. They're not a like a one-time solution. They will still cause problems. Transitioning to a low carbon economy requires systemic change. So what is required? A systemic change, including substantial investments, rethinking our global economic system. Such a shift is necessary, will likely entail significant short-term costs. So requires systemic change will ultimately necessarily require short-term costs, significant short-term costs, particularly for fossil fuel industries. So what is challenging about this process of transitioning? Let's look at A. Technological advancements will be sufficient. So again, measuring, quantifying degree of success will be sufficient, invalid. D says fossil fuel industries will be more affected. This is valid by transition to a low carbon economy than agriculture. These words, I know some of you have gone with option D because you don't read complete options, but let this be a lesson. These words, comparing fossil fuel to agriculture, not discussed in the passage. C says global economic system does not need to change. Completely invalid. B is the right answer. Short-term costs of transitioning to a low-carbon economy are inevitable. Inevitable is measuring this. It's saying short-term costs are necessary. Such a shift, while ultimately necessary, will likely entail significant short-term costs, particularly for some industries. So for some industries, there will be some short-term costs of transitioning, right? So B is the correct answer. Let's look at question 61. Likely consequence of proliferation of social media as discussed in the passage. Social media is likely to strengthen. Let's look at option A. I'm expecting all of you would have read the passage because we are told challenges, they've become ubiquitous. It's a longer passage and they have benefits, but there is widespread unintended consequence for mental health and societal dynamics. Most significant concern is on self-esteem of users, particularly adolescents. Another issue is increasing polarization of opinions. Social media platforms rely on algorithms. This can contribute to decline in critical thinking. So mental impact on adults and adolescents. Despite these challenges, social media platforms continue to evolve, incorporating new features aimed at users. All right, and their impacts, the extent to which these changes can address broader societal impacts remains uncertain. So even though there are changes that are suggested, how much it can address the broader societal impacts is uncertain. So let's go through these questions. Which of the following is a likely consequence? Likely consequence, by the way, is an inference type question. We are trying to conclude which of these is a likely outcome. A says social media is likely to strengthen societal bonds. Not mentioned. D says exposure to diverse viewpoints will enhance critical thinking. This is opposite of what the adults will actually lose their critical thinking. C says the use of social media leads to an increase in face-to-face communication. So likely consequence not mentioned, although it can be an outcome of our own understanding, but not mentioned. Let's look at D. Social media platforms may exacerbate the feelings of inadequacy and contribute to mental health issues. So the problems listed throughout the passage are mentioned in option B. This is a likely consequence of proliferation of social media. All right. This, especially option C, increase in face-to-face communication. This is not necessary, right? So we can say the use of social media may lead to, or could have led to, or may lead to, or would lead to. Would know actually. May lead to and could lead to. Yeah, could possibly lead to, or possibly leads to. Any of these may, could, possibly are suggesting chance. But if I say leads to, this is saying it will definitely create this. This would be invalid. B is the right answer here for question 61. Question 62 from the same passage is looking for assumptions. So let's look at about design of social media. A says social media platforms are designed with the sole purpose of fostering competition. If you notice, the last paragraph says they are trying to make improvements. Sole purpose would be invalid. D, social media platforms are largely responsible for mental health challenges faced by users. We can't say if there is user X and that user X has mental health challenge. Is this because of social media or is this because of other factors, right? There could be multiple other factors, unknown. So D is invalid. C says social media companies explicitly try to induce, so they go out of their way to try and induce inadequacy. This we can't state. Algorithms on social media platforms prioritize user engagement over exposing users to diverse viewpoints, right? So this was, again, I would say, a little tricky question. B is the right answer. The prioritize user engagement comes from the last sentence of the passage. All right, the last part of the passage. Option B is a valid assumption. If I said they don't prioritize, the last part, the second half, especially the last paragraph, would stop making sense. Option B is a valid assumption. Let's look at passage 2. This is for question 63. The impact of social media on political engagement is a subject of much debate. Some argue that social media platforms have democratized access. So on political engagement is subject of debate. Some have said that this is good. More people are participating in politics. We are given examples. On other hand, it has spread misinformation and polarizing. The echo chamber where individuals are exposed has led to increased political polarization. Furthermore, social media algorithms often prioritize sensational and emotionally charged content. Which of the following is the most logical rational inference? This is sort of the traditional inference question type that we have seen in the exam. A says, as social media continues, we just focus on the word inference, by the way. As social media continues to shape political engagement, the need for establishing clear regulations is obvious. So we clearly need to set up some regulations. Now, if you notice, the reason why this question gets challenging is if we pay attention to, if we try and solve this passage based on memory, and if we use prior passages, we'll mark option A as the right answer. But in this passage, there is no mention of regulations. So regulations is obvious, is invalid. I expect students to get this wrong, and it's because you've solved this based on memory. B says social media is the most effective tool for democratizing. This is obviously invalid. C says the only issue with social media is the spread of misinformation. Obviously, again, invalid. D, social media has the potential. This is valid. Potential is discussing chance to strengthen one's existing tendencies and opinions. Your own opinions would, in an echo chamber, right? So they would get strengthened. D is the right answer for question 63. Option D is the right answer. Let's look at question 71. We're looking for summaries to challenges of democracy. Okay. So it's a slightly longer passage. In the world of politics, concept of democracy has been regarded as most effective systems. In theory, democracy provides fair and equal platform. In theory, the core principles include free elections, etc. Democracy is described for as often seen as more transparent. However, practical reality is often far more complex. So challenges, critics argue it can lead to inefficiency, gridlock. Challenges of democracy are discussed. People might exploit, manipulate democratic processes for personal political gain. Despite these challenges, many still believe democracy. So despite these challenges, many still believe democracy is the best system. highlight the need for continuous reforms. The author is recommending continuous reforms in democracy so that your institutions are robust and all citizens are benefited. So a clear recommendation at the start. Democracy, its pros and cons, and a recommendation to continuously reform democracy. Let's look at question 71. We're trying to summarize this idea, pros, cons, and there is a way to improve the situation. So let's look at A. Democracy always leads to efficient governance. Invalid. D. Democracy guarantees that all citizens have equal access. This is in theory. It's not in practice. And C says democracy can be effective when there is a single political party. Invalid. B is the right answer. Democracy can suffer from inefficiency, polarization, undue influence from interest groups. So if you notice now, option B is definitely problematic. And it's because it's very, very limited or narrow. It does not even include the full, even partial main point to say would be less. But by sheer elimination process, we know that this is what we are left with. If there was any other option which was slightly more well-rounded, we would select that. So we need elimination, especially for a question like this. B is the only possible choice. Remember this phrase, especially for main point and summary questions. Many times we are forced, like this case, we are forced to select an option by elimination, only by elimination. Given a choice, we would say all 4 options aren't good fits, but aren't a good fit. But option B is the only possible choice we are left with. We are forced to select it. What is the one reason why many people continue to believe in democracy despite its challenges? Notice now that it's a slightly different question type, so I'm going to mark it. What is the one reason why many people continue to believe in democracy despite challenges? You should mark it too in the exam. A says democracy leads to complete political stability, absence of conflict. Invalid. B, democracy ensures political power is distributed equally. Invalid. This is not the reason why many people still believe it. Allows for greater political participation. There are benefits, accountability and protection of individual freedoms. So C is right. Allows for is great. It's not saying democracy leads to. Allows for is saying there are chances, there's possibility. So C is the best case scenario. D says democracy prevents the rise of populist movements and political instability. Prevents would be invalid. C is the right answer. Let's look at passage 2, and this is question 73. We're looking for inferences. Education is often heralded as the key to solving most problems. We can solve many problems with democracy, including poverty, inequality, etc. However, true impact of education, not democracy, I meant education, depends largely on how it is implemented. Many regions' access to quality education remains limited. So, how it's implemented, quality, curriculum, simply increasing access is not enough. So, the author is saying only increasing access is not enough if it does not align with needs of local communities and global economy. So, update, reach, and purpose of education. Purpose should be to modernize or to address today's problems, right? That's what the passage meant. Let's look at option A. Access to quality education alone, right? We feel this is problematic, but this is saying alone is insufficient. So we need quality plus other factors like curriculum revision, etc. So A could possibly be the right answer, even though it's mentioning this problematic phrase. B says education must be aligned to local and regional goals. Regional goals for it to be effective, invalid. Global is suggested. C says quality education is key to addressing most global challenges. Quality is key, invalid. And D says poverty and inequality will be solved. Right? So the correct answer is option A. We are only left with option A. All right. So that brings us to the end of our discussion. What I want to mention is there will be another Anubhav test. We'll have different kinds of passages in that test. Make sure that you go back to what I said at the start of class and those few instructions that I gave you before your next Anubhav test. So you can remind yourselves how to be methodical. This paper, the verbal section, I would categorize it as easy, easy to moderate. Maybe a few questions can be considered moderate. So like anything less than like a 75% accuracy would be considered problematic. All right. But with that, I'll bring today's discussion to an end. I want all of you all to type in whatever doubts, etc. you may have, and we'll be sure to resolve them. And I'll see you in the next discussion. Thank you, everyone.